My name is Roy, and I am 28 years old. Tonight I was driving home from a 12-hour shift at my software company when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Come home now. Important family matter." A knot formed in my stomach. Despite my exhaustion, I turned the car around worried about my parents. Little did I know this would be the beginning of a series of events that would completely transform my life and redefine what family truly means. Before I tell you about the biggest shock of my life, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like button if you find value in my story. Your support means everything as I share this painful journey. I am an only child in my family. After graduating with a software engineering degree from the state university, I had my whole future ahead of me. Several tech companies were interested in hiring me, including one prestigious firm in Silicon Valley that offered an impressive starting salary. That was 5 years ago, right when everything in my family changed. My father, Walter, worked in construction his entire life. He was always the provider, the strong one, the decision maker. 5 years ago, he suffered what we were told was a debilitating accident at work. A heavy beam fell and injured his back, leaving him unable to work, or so he claimed. My mother, Linda, only worked part-time at the local grocery store, which wasn't nearly enough to support them. When Dad's accident happened, I was just about to accept that job in Silicon Valley. I remember sitting in my apartment, staring at the offer letter when Mom called me sobbing about Dad's condition. Within a week, I had declined the Silicon Valley position and accepted a much lower-paying job at a local software company in my hometown. The salary was less than half of what I could have earned, but it allowed me to stay close to home and help my parents. Over the past 5 years, I have shouldered an enormous financial burden. Dad's medical bills totaled over $87,000, which I paid off completely. I bought Mom a reliable car so she could get to work safely. Most significantly, I've been making the mortgage payments on their house for the past 3 years. I never complained because I believed it was my responsibility as their son. My relationship with Dad was always complicated. Even before his accident, he was a stern man who rarely showed affection. He criticized more than he praised, but I always tried to understand him. I knew his own father had been tough on him, and he was just passing down what he knew. After his accident, Dad's personality became even more difficult. He was constantly angry, bitter about his situation, and took most of it out on me. He would complain about the food I brought home, the way I organized his medications, or how I was never doing enough. I kept telling myself it was the pain and the loss of his independence making him act that way. I empathized with how difficult it must be for a proud man to suddenly depend on his son. Mom usually tried to play peacemaker between us, but she nearly always took Dad's side in any disagreement. "Your father is suffering," she would remind me whenever I showed frustration. "He needs our support now more than ever." So I would swallow my feelings and keep trying to help. Despite the challenges, I maintained a positive attitude. I told myself that family sticks together during hard times. I focused on the good moments, like when Dad would occasionally thank me for helping with his physical therapy, or when Mom would cook my favorite meal as a small gesture of appreciation. Those moments were rare, but they kept me going. I built my entire life around supporting my parents. I turned down promotions that would require travel. I declined social invitations to stay home and help Dad. I even ended a promising relationship with a woman named Amanda because Dad said she was taking too much of my time away from family obligations. I believed I was doing the right thing by putting my parents first. That's what a good son does, right? Little did I know that my dedication and sacrifice were being viewed very differently by the people I was trying to help. That fateful day had started like any other. I woke up early, made breakfast for everyone, helped Dad with his morning stretches, and headed to work. We were approaching a crucial deadline for a major software project, so I stayed late at the office working until 8 in the evening to make sure everything was perfect. Just as I was packing up to leave, my boss called me into his office. To my surprise, he informed me that due to my exceptional performance and dedication, I was being given a 15% raise and would be promoted to senior developer next month. This was incredible news. Despite sacrificing my dream job years ago, I had worked hard and was finally seeing real progress in my career. Feeling celebratory, I stopped at a bakery on my way home and bought a chocolate cake, Dad's favorite. I also picked up a bottle of sparkling cider, since Dad's medications didn't allow him to drink alcohol. I was excited to share my good news with my parents and perhaps enjoy a rare moment of family celebration. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar truck parked outside. As I entered the house balancing the cake and cider, I found my parents sitting in the living room with Uncle Bob, Dad's older brother. The atmosphere was tense, and all three of them had serious expressions on their faces. "What's going on?" I asked, setting down my purchases on the coffee table. "Is everything okay?" Dad glared at me, his face red with anger. Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. Uncle Bob just looked uncomfortable. "We need to talk," Dad said in a cold voice I hadn't heard before. That's when I noticed my laptop was open on the table between them. I always left it password protected, but somehow they had gained access. As I moved closer, I could see they were looking through my personal email account. "You went through my private emails?" I asked, shocked at the invasion of privacy. "We had to," Mom replied, finally looking up. "We needed to know what you were planning." "Planning? What are you talking about?" Dad turned the laptop screen toward me. "Explain this," he demanded. On the screen was an email from my former potential employer in Silicon Valley. They had reached out again, offering me a position with even better compensation than before. They mentioned they had followed my career and were still interested in having me join their team. "You were going to abandon us," Dad accused. "After everything we've done for you, you were planning to run off to California and leave us to fend for ourselves." I was completely confused. "Dad, that email is from 3 weeks ago. I already declined their offer." "More lies," he shouted, slamming his hand on the armrest of his chair. "We saw your response. You asked for time to consider." "Yes, out of professional courtesy. But I called them the next day and turned it down. I wouldn't leave you guys." Mom spoke up, her voice trembling. "Roy, we've sacrificed so much for you. We gave you everything growing up. And now when we need you most, you're planning to abandon us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were twisting everything around, making it sound like I was the one who had been receiving support rather than providing it. "What sacrifices?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I've been supporting this household for 5 years. I've paid off Dad's medical bills. I make your mortgage payments. I buy the groceries. Because that's what family does," Dad interrupted. "We raised you for 18 years. You owe us." The conversation was spinning out of control. That's when Uncle Bob cleared his throat and revealed something that made my blood run cold. "Roy, there's something else you should know," he said awkwardly. "Your dad and we bought a fishing boat last month." "A boat?" I was confused by this random change of subject. "A 28-foot bayliner," Uncle Bob continued. "Really nice one. We got a good deal." "That's good for you." I still didn't understand what this had to do with anything. "We used your credit card," Dad stated flatly, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "You're always saying we should enjoy life more, so we did." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "You used my credit card to buy a boat without asking me. How did you even get my card information?" "It was easy," Mom said. "You leave your wallet in your jacket sometimes. I just wrote down the numbers." The boat had cost $23,000. $23,000 of my money spent without my knowledge or permission. My head was spinning. "But that's theft," I stammered. "Don't be dramatic," Dad scoffed. "It's not theft when it's family. Besides, you make good money. You can afford it." I suddenly realized that the cake and cider I'd brought home to celebrate my raise would now go toward paying for a boat I didn't want and would never use. The irony was painful. "You had no right," I said quietly. "That money was for my future." "Your future?" Dad laughed bitterly. "What about our future? What about everything we need?" It was then that I began to see my family in a completely different light. The tension in the room was suffocating as the reality of my situation started to sink in. I stared at my father, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the parent I thought I knew. His face was contorted with anger, but there was something else there too, a calculation that chilled me to the bone. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" Dad continued, his voice rising. Every day waiting on you, depending on your schedule, having to ask for every little thing like children. Walter, Uncle Bob cautioned. Looking uncomfortable, maybe we should calm down a bit. But Dad was just getting started. He stood up suddenly, and I noticed something that made me freeze. He moved easily without the grimace of pain that had been a constant for the past 5 years. He paced the room with fluidity that should have been impossible for someone with his supposed back injury. Dad, I said slowly, your back seems a lot better. He waved dismissively. It has good days and bad days. I've never seen you move like that before, I pressed. You haven't used your cane in this conversation once. Mom jumped in quickly. The new medication is working wonders, Dr. Mills said. Stop, I interrupted, pieces falling into place. Just stop. Dad, how long has your back been better? The room fell silent. Uncle Bob looked at the floor. Finally, Dad shrugged. A couple of years, more or less. The first year was rough, but after that, I felt like I was in a nightmare. 2 years. You've been able to work for 2 years and said nothing. While I've been killing myself working overtime to support this household. It's not that simple. Mom interjected. Your father's not as young as he used to be. Who would hire him at his age? Plenty of places, I countered. Construction companies are always looking for experienced foremen. You could have at least tried. Dad's face darkened. You think you know everything, don't you, Mr. College Degree? Looks down on his blue-collar father. You have no idea what the real world is like. I've been living in the real world, I shouted back. Working 60-hour weeks, giving up my dreams, my relationships, everything to take care of you both. That's when Dad said the words that would change everything between us forever. You've ruined our lives, you're a burden, he roared. Before your mother and I had you, we had plans, dreams. We were going to travel, buy a vacation home. Instead, we spent everything raising you. And now you hold it over our heads that you help out a little. I looked to my mother, expecting her to defend me, to say something, anything to counter these horrible accusations. Instead, she nodded along with my father's words. We've given up so much for you, Roy, she said softly. Is it so wrong to want something back now? My mind was racing. Something back? I've given you everything for the past 5 years. Everything. Uncle Bob, looking increasingly uncomfortable, finally spoke up. Roy, there's something else you should know. Your parents. They've been planning this for a while. Planning what I asked, although I was starting to suspect the awful truth. Their early retirement, Uncle Bob said, not meeting my eyes. Walter figured with your good job there was no reason for either of them to work anymore. They've been telling everyone in the family how you insisted on supporting them completely. I turned to my parents in disbelief. Is that true? Neither denied it. In fact, Dad looked almost proud. You make good money, he said defensively. Why shouldn't we benefit from that? After all we did for you. And what exactly did you do for me that normal parents don't do for their children? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. We put a roof over your head. Fed you, clothed you, Dad was shouting again. That's called being a parent, I responded. That was your choice when you decided to have a child. Mom stood up now, her face flushed. You. Ungrateful. Do you know what I went through to raise you? The stretch marks. The sleep deprivation. The worry. Uncle Bob, seemingly unable to contain himself any longer, added, and all the things they say about you to the rest of the family. That's not right either. What things? I asked. They tell everyone you're stingy, that you make them beg for every penny, that you control them with your money. Uncle Bob looked genuinely sorry to be revealing this. Last Christmas, your dad told everyone you refused to fix their furnace and they nearly froze. But I know you paid for a brand new heating system last winter. I remembered that heating system, $6,000 I didn't really have at the time, put on a credit card I was still paying off. The truth hit me like a tidal wave. I had been manipulated and used for years by the very people I had sacrificed everything for. They had lied about my father's condition. They had stolen my credit card information. They had slandered me to our extended family. And worst of all, they felt entitled to all of it. I expected to feel rage, I expected to scream and yell and break things. Instead, a strange calm settled over me. I looked at my parents, really looked at them perhaps for the first time, seeing not the idealized figures of my childhood, but the flawed, selfish people they actually were. And I smiled. My reaction clearly unnerved them. Dad's tirade stopped mid-sentence. Mom took a step back. "Roy," she questioned uncertainly. Without saying another word, I turned and walked upstairs to my bedroom. Once in my bedroom, I closed the door quietly behind me and took a deep breath. The strange calm that had come over me downstairs remained. It was as if a fog had lifted, allowing me to see clearly for the first time in years. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I grabbed my large duffel bag from the closet and began methodically packing my essential belongings. Clothes, toiletries, important documents, and my computer equipment. I could hear raised voices downstairs. Uncle Bob seemed to be arguing with my parents, but I tuned them out. Their drama no longer concerned me. From my sock drawer, I retrieved an emergency cash stash of $800 I kept hidden. I also gathered my passport, birth certificate, and other important papers from the lockbox under my bed. Years of handling my parents' paperwork had taught me the importance of keeping original documents accessible. Within 20 minutes, I had packed everything truly important. I did a final sweep of the room, my eyes landing on the family photo on my nightstand. It was from my college graduation, one of the last times I remembered feeling genuinely proud and happy before Dad's accident changed everything. I left the photo where it stood. That chapter of my life was over. As I descended the stairs with my bags, the arguing in the living room ceased immediately. 3 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Mom asked, her voice high and thin. "Leaving," I replied simply. Dad scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous. Where would you even go?" "That's no longer your concern," I said, my voice level and calm. I walked to the door without another word, loaded my bags into my car, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the doorway looking stunned. They had never imagined I would actually leave. In their minds, I was trapped by obligation and guilt chains I had just broken with a single decision. I checked into a modest hotel near my workplace. The room was basic but clean, and most importantly, it was mine. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I pulled out my phone and saw that it was already flooded with text messages and missed calls from my parents. I ignored them all and instead opened my email. First, I composed a message to the company in Silicon Valley that had reached out to me. I explained my changed circumstances and asked if their offer was still open or if they might consider a remote work arrangement. Then I contacted a local real estate agent recommended by a coworker and inquired about apartment rentals in the area. As I was searching online for longer-term accommodations, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Jessica, a former classmate from college who worked in real estate. We hadn't spoken in years, but mutual friends had kept us loosely connected on social media. "Roy, hi, this is Jessica Peterson from university. Hope you don't mind me calling out of the blue, but Martin mentioned you might be looking for a place to stay." Martin was my coworker who had recommended the real estate agent. News traveled fast. "That's right," I confirmed. "I need a new living situation as soon as possible." "Well, this is a bit unconventional," Jessica said, "but I have a rental property that just became vacant. The previous tenants moved out last week and I was about to list it. It's a small guest house behind my main property. Nothing fancy, but it's private and available immediately if you're interested." It felt like the universe was finally throwing me a lifeline. I arranged to meet Jessica the following morning to see the place. The next day brought another critical task, securing my finances. I went to my bank first thing in the morning and opened new accounts that my parents couldn't access. I transferred my funds from the joint accounts we had established for convenience years ago. I then visited the credit card company to report the fraudulent charges for the boat and to request new cards. Finally, I called all the utility companies and service providers for my parents' house and removed myself as the responsible billing party. It was while handling these financial matters that the emotional weight of what had happened began to hit me. The bank teller noticed my hands shaking as I signed the paperwork. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked kindly. "Just going through some family changes," I managed to reply. "Family changes." Such a simple phrase for the complete collapse of what I had believed was an unbreakable bond. As I drove to meet Jessica, at the guest house, waves of grief washed over me. Not just for the relationships I was losing, but for the years I had wasted, the opportunities missed, and the person I might have become without the crushing weight of manipulative obligation. Jessica's guest house turned out to be perfect for my needs. It was a cozy one-bedroom structure with a small kitchen living area and even a little patio. Best of all, it was ready for immediate occupancy and within my budget. The previous tenant was my cousin Jessica, explained as she showed me around. He took good care of the place. I never even listed it officially. Word of mouth only. As we completed the paperwork, Jessica hesitated before handing me the keys. "Roy, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay? Martin mentioned you needed a place urgently, and you seem different from when I knew you in school." Something about her genuine concern broke through my carefully maintained composure. Before I knew it, I was telling her the whole story. Dad's fake disability, the financial manipulation, the credit card theft, all of it. Jessica listened without interruption, her expression shifting from surprise to outrage on my behalf. "Roy, that's not just wrong, it's illegal," she said when I finished. "Have you considered talking to a lawyer?" I hadn't, but Jessica's suggestion made sense. She recommended her brother-in-law, a lawyer, specializing in financial matters, and I made an appointment to see him the following week. Over the next few days, I settled into my new home and began rebuilding my life from scratch. I bought basic furnishings, set up my work area, and slowly developed a routine that didn't revolve around caring for my parents. It felt strange, both liberating and disorienting. At times, guilt would creep in. Had I abandoned my family? Was I the selfish, ungrateful son they accused me of being? Then I would remember the boat purchased, the lies about Dad's recovery, and the ugly things they had said about me to our extended family. The guilt would recede, replaced by a growing sense of self-respect I hadn't felt in years. My parents continued their barrage of messages and calls, cycling between anger, guilt-tripping, and occasional apologies that never quite acknowledged the real issues. I responded minimally, setting boundaries for the first time in my adult life. It was hard, but necessary. In the quiet evenings alone in my new place, I began to rediscover who I was, beyond being a caretaker and provider. I picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends I had neglected, and started imagining a future shaped by my own choices rather than my parents' demands. It wasn't always easy, and there were nights I cried myself to sleep mourning the loving family I had thought I had. But with each passing day, I grew stronger and more certain that I had made the right decision. A week after I moved out, I received a text message from my mother that cut straight to my core: "Don't come back." The 3 simple words were followed by a paragraph of accusations about my character, my ingratitude, and my abandonment of court, the family. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to process the pain it caused. Despite everything, some part of me had hoped for reconciliation, for acknowledgement of the harm they had caused. This message shattered that hope. After careful consideration, I replied with a simple message: "Okay, I just stopped paying your bills." It was the truth. I had already removed myself from all their accounts and service providers. Now they would have to manage their own finances, something they were fully capable of doing, but had manipulated me into handling for years. Within minutes, my phone exploded with activity. Text messages, voicemails, and calls came pouring in from both parents. The tone shifted dramatically from my mother's initial "Don't come back" to panic about how they would manage without my financial support. "You can't just cut us off like this. What about the mortgage payment due next week? How are we supposed to pay for the cable bill? Your father needs his medications." The messages revealed just how dependent they had become, or rather how dependent they had chosen to be. My father, who I now knew had been physically capable of working for years, would need to find employment. My mother might need to increase her hours at the grocery store. They would need to budget and economize like most adults do. 2 days later, the situation escalated beyond text messages. I was at work, focused on coding a complicated program module, when my team lead Marcus approached my desk with an uncomfortable expression. "Roy, there are some people asking for you in the lobby. They seem upset." My stomach dropped. "My parents." Marcus nodded. "Security called up. They're making quite a scene." I asked Marcus to accompany me downstairs, grateful for the moral support. When the elevator doors opened onto the lobby, I saw my parents arguing loudly with the receptionist and security guard. My mother was crying dramatically, while my father pounded his fist on the reception desk, demanding to see me. "You can't keep us from our son," he was shouting. "We have rights." The security guard looked relieved when he spotted me. "Mr. Wilson, these individuals claim to be your parents. They're insisting on seeing you immediately." I approached calmly Marcus at my side. "Dad, Mom, this is my workplace. You can't come here and disrupt my job." "You've left us no choice," Dad bellowed, drawing stares from everyone in the lobby. "You won't answer our calls. You've cut off our support. What were we supposed to do?" "Perhaps manage your own finances like the capable adults you are," I suggested quietly. Mom stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "How could you do this to us, Roy? After all we've done for you." "Let's not have this conversation here," I said firmly. "No, let's have it right now." Dad's face was red with anger. "Tell your coworkers what kind of son abandons his parents when they need him most." Marcus stepped in then, his voice professional but firm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. This is a place of business." "And who are you?" Dad sneered. "I'm the team lead here, and Roy is one of my most valued employees. If you continue to disrupt our workplace, I will have security escort you out. And we may need to involve the police." The mention of police caused my parents to hesitate. They had created a scene to embarrass me into compliance, but involving law enforcement could backfire, especially given the credit card fraud they had committed. "This isn't over," Dad warned as they finally turned to leave. "The family is going to hear about this." True to his word, my father began a campaign to turn our extended family against me. Calls and messages started coming in from aunts, uncles, and cousins, most of whom had only heard my parents' distorted version of events. "How could you abandon your poor father after his accident? Your mother is beside herself with worry." "Family takes care of family, Roy. You know better than this." Some relatives, like Uncle Bob, who had witnessed the confrontation, tried to remain neutral or even quietly supported me. He called a few days after the workplace incident. "Roy, I want you to know I don't agree with how your parents are handling this," he said. "That boat situation. That wasn't right. I didn't know they were using your card without permission. I thought you had agreed to it." His support meant more than he could know, providing validation that I wasn't crazy for feeling violated and manipulated. My cousin Alice attempted to play mediator, suggesting a family meeting to clear the air. While I appreciated her intentions, I declined. "Alice, I'm not ready for that," I explained. "They haven't acknowledged any wrongdoing. A meeting now would just be more manipulation." Through these conversations with extended family, I began discovering more lies my parents had told over the years. Apparently, they had claimed I had forced them to remortgage their house to pay for my college education, when in fact I had worked part-time jobs and secured scholarships that covered most of my tuition. They had told everyone that I lived with them because I couldn't manage on my own, rather than the truth that I had sacrificed my independence to care for them. Each revelation strengthened my resolve. This wasn't a temporary family spat. It was the necessary end to years of exploitation. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was essential for my well-being. Around this time, Jessica invited me to dinner at her home, where I also met her husband, Tyler. The simple normalcy of sharing a meal with friends without tension or manipulation felt foreign but wonderful. After dinner, Jessica mentioned something that caught me by surprise. "Roy, I hope this isn't overstepping, but I've noticed you seem to be carrying a lot of emotional weight from this situation with your parents. Have you considered talking to someone professional about it?" "You mean like a therapist?" The idea hadn't occurred to me. "My friend Beth is an excellent counselor who specializes in family relationship issues," Jessica explained. She helped Tyler work through some difficult dynamics with his own family a few years ago. Tyler nodded in agreement. Best thing I ever did. Gave me tools to handle the situation without letting it destroy me. I took Beth's contact information thinking it couldn't hurt to at least have a consultation. Little did I know how important that recommendation would become in my healing journey. 3 months after leaving my parents' home, I received incredible news from the Silicon Valley company I had contacted. They offered me a senior developer position with the option to work remotely with occasional trips to their headquarters for team meetings. The salary was triple what I was making at my local job, more than enough to completely transform my financial situation. After careful consideration and discussion with Marcus, who had become a genuine friend and mentor, I accepted the offer. He was sad to see me go, but understood the opportunity was too good to pass up. You've earned this, Roy, he told me during my last week. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty about your success. With my new salary, I was able to move from Jessica's guest house to a modern apartment in a nicer part of town. The space was entirely my own, decorated according to my tastes, with no compromises required to accommodate anyone else's preferences or needs. For the first time in my adult life, I was creating a home that reflected who I truly was. My new job challenged me intellectually and creatively in ways my previous position never had. Working with cutting-edge technology and brilliant colleagues pushed me to grow and develop skills I didn't know I possessed. The flexible remote arrangement allowed me to establish a healthy work-life balance, another novel concept, after years of dividing my time between work and caretaking. With my newfound financial stability and free time, I began volunteering at a local community center teaching coding basics to underprivileged teenagers. Many of these kids reminded me of myself at that age, eager to learn but facing obstacles outside their control. Helping them discover paths to better futures through technology became deeply fulfilling. Through the community center, I met Rachel, another volunteer who worked as a software engineer for a different tech company. We connected instantly over shared interests and similar worldviews. Our friendship gradually developed into something more, and for the first time I entered a relationship without the shadow of my parents' disapproval or the constraints of caregiving responsibilities. Rachel was independent, supportive, and insightful. When I finally told her the full story of what had happened with my family, she listened without judgment but also didn't mince words. What they did was financial and emotional abuse, Roy, she said plainly. You didn't deserve any of it. Hearing someone name what had happened so clearly was both painful and liberating. It gave me permission to acknowledge the harm that had been done without minimizing it or making excuses. Meanwhile, I had begun regular sessions with Beth, the therapist Jessica had recommended. Our work together helped me recognize patterns I hadn't been aware of, how I had been conditioned since childhood to prioritize my parents' needs above my own. How I had internalized messages about my worth being tied to what I could provide for others, and how difficult it was for me to set healthy boundaries. Guilt is a powerful emotion, Beth explained during one pivotal session. But feeling guilty doesn't always mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes it just means you've been programmed to feel responsible for things that aren't actually your responsibility. This insight resonated deeply. The guilt that had plagued me since moving out began to lose its grip as I recognized its origins in manipulation rather than genuine wrongdoing on my part. Around this time, I received an unexpected message from my mother's younger sister, Aunt Karen, who had been living overseas for several years and had just returned to the States. Roy, I've heard two very different versions of what happened between you and your parents, she wrote. Before I make any judgments, I'd like to hear your side. I appreciated her willingness to listen and shared the truth with her, including details about the credit card fraud and my father's deception about his recovery. Her response was validating. I always sensed something was off with how Walter and Linda talked about you, she replied. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I wasn't around to see what was happening. You deserved better. Her apology for something that wasn't even her fault was more acknowledgement than I had ever received from my actual parents. It helped heal a small part of the wound their betrayal had left. 6 months into my new job, I was assigned to lead a significant project developing specialized software for healthcare providers. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, and my team's solution received recognition across the company. My manager nominated me for an innovation award, which came with a bonus and company-wide recognition. On the evening I received news of the award, Rachel organized a small celebration with Jessica Tyler Marcus and a few other close friends. Looking around at the genuine support and happiness surrounding me, I realized I had built a chosen family that gave me more authentic connection than my biological one ever had. "I'd like to propose a toast," Marcus said, raising his glass, "to Roy, not just for his professional accomplishments, which are impressive, but for his courage in reclaiming his life and becoming the person he was always meant to be." Their words and support meant everything. As we celebrated late into the evening, I reflected on how much had changed in less than a year. I had gone from a person defined by obligation and sacrifice to someone pursuing his own dreams and surrounded by healthy relationships. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. My parents had claimed that I would fall apart without them, that I needed their guidance and supervision. Instead, I was thriving in every area of my life, professionally, financially, socially, and emotionally. Most importantly, I was learning to trust myself again. The self-doubt that had been planted by years of manipulation was gradually being replaced by confidence in my own perceptions and decisions. I no longer needed external validation to know that I was on the right path. This newfound self-trust would prove essential for what was to come next. 18 months after I had walked out of my parents' house, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, I was surprised to hear the voice of my mother's younger brother, Uncle Frank. "Roy, it's your Uncle Frank. I know we haven't spoken much since. Everything happened. But there's something you should know." He explained that my parents were in serious financial trouble. Without my support, they had quickly fallen behind on bills. My father had eventually found work as a night security guard, and my mother had increased her hours at the grocery store, but it wasn't enough to maintain the lifestyle they had become accustomed to. They had refinanced the house to pay off the boat and other debts, and now the bank was threatening foreclosure. "I'm not saying you should bail them out," Uncle Frank clarified. "God knows they made their bed. But I thought you should know what's happening." I thanked him for the information, genuinely appreciating his straightforward approach without pressure or guilt-tripping. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking. My first instinct was to say they had brought this on themselves, which was true. My second thought was more compassionate. Despite everything, these were the people who had raised me. While they had failed me in profound ways, perhaps there was value in one final conversation, if only for my own closure. After discussing it with Beth in our next therapy session, I decided to meet with my parents one last time with conditions. The meeting would happen in a neutral public location. Uncle Frank would be present as a moderator, and I would leave immediately if they became manipulative or abusive. We arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop on a Sunday afternoon. I arrived early, securing a table in the corner that offered some privacy without isolation. Uncle Frank arrived next, giving me a supportive pat on the shoulder before taking his seat. When my parents walked in, I was struck by how much they had aged in the past year and a half. My father's hair had gone completely gray, and my mother looked thin and tired. For a moment I felt a pang of the old guilt, but I reminded myself of all I had learned in therapy about distinguishing between genuine responsibility and manipulated emotion. After awkward greetings and ordering coffee, an uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Uncle Frank finally broke it. "We're here because Roy was willing to meet with you," he reminded my parents. "I think it would be appropriate for you to start." My father cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "You're looking well," he said stiffly. "Thank you," I replied. "I am well." Another silence. My mother fidgeted with her napkin. "Frank says you have a new job," she ventured. "I work remotely for a California company," I confirmed. "I still live here in town." "You never told us you moved," she said, a note of accusation creeping into her voice. I met her gaze steadily. "You told me not to come back." She had the grace to look embarrassed. I was upset when I wrote that. We all say things we don't mean sometimes, I acknowledged. But I think we need to address the real issues here. My father's face darkened. "The real issue is that you abandoned your family when we needed you. After everything we did for you," Uncle Frank interrupted. "Walter, that's not why we're here. You agreed to listen, not to make accusations." Dad subsided, though I could see anger simmering beneath the surface. I took a deep breath and spoke from the heart. For 5 years, I gave everything I had to support this family. I paid the bills, I handled the finances, I provided care and emotional support. I did it willingly, because I love you both. But you betrayed that love and trust. Dad, you lied about your recovery. You both stole my credit card information and made major purchases without my consent. You told the family I was stingy and controlling when I was actually supporting you completely. My mother began to cry softly. My father stared at the table, jaw clenched. I'm not saying these things to hurt you, I continued. I'm saying them because they're true, and we can't move forward without acknowledging the truth. So you're just going to let the bank take our house? Dad finally looked up, anger and desperation in his eyes. After all these years, that's what it comes down to. The house situation is a result of choices you made. I replied calmly. I'm not responsible for solving that problem. Then why are you even here? He demanded. It was a fair question. Why had I agreed to this meeting? I'm here because despite everything, you're still my parents. I don't hate you. I don't want to see you suffer. But I also can't return to an unhealthy dynamic where I'm exploited and manipulated. My mother reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I gently moved it away. We made mistakes, she admitted, tears flowing freely now. We were wrong. Please, Roy, we need your help. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from either of them, but I noticed it came coupled with another request for help. Was it genuine remorse, or just another manipulation tactic because they needed something from me? I'm not going to give you money, I said clearly, but I can help in other ways. I can refer you to a financial counselor who might be able to work out a payment plan with the bank. I can help you create a realistic budget. I can point you toward resources for job training if you want to increase your earning potential. My father scoffed. So that's it, financial advice. We need actual help, not lectures. Walter, Uncle Frank warned again. I remained calm. That is actual help. It's the kind of help that could lead to real change, not just a temporary bailout that enables more of the same behavior. You've changed, my mother said quietly. Yes, I agreed. I have. I've learned that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being. I've learned that helping someone doesn't mean doing everything for them. And I've learned that I deserve respect and honesty from the people in my life, including my parents. Dad pushed back from the table abruptly. This is a waste of time. He's not going to help us. I'm offering the help I can give, I corrected. Just not the kind you want. Come on, Linda, Dad said to my mother. We're leaving. Mom hesitated, looking between Dad and me. For a moment I thought she might stay, might choose a different path. But then she stood and gathered her purse. I do love you, Roy, she said softly. I know, I replied. I love you too. That's why I hope you'll reconsider my offer of help with financial planning. They left without another word. Uncle Frank and I sat in silence for a few minutes. You handled that well, he finally said. Better than I would have. Therapy helps, I smiled wryly. Lots and lots of therapy. We talked a while longer. Uncle Frank promised to keep me updated on their situation and to try to encourage them to accept the type of help I was willing to provide. As we parted, he hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you, nephew. You're a good man. Those words meant more than he could know. In the months that followed, I maintained limited contact with my parents through Uncle Frank. They did eventually accept my referral to a financial counselor who helped them negotiate with the bank. They managed to keep the house, though they had to sell the boat and make other significant lifestyle changes. Our relationship remained distant but civil. I sent cards on birthdays and holidays. They occasionally texted to share news or ask polite questions about my life. It wasn't the close family bond I had once hoped for, but it was honest and had clear boundaries, which made it healthier than what we had before. Meanwhile, my own life continued to flourish. Rachel and I moved in together after dating for a year. My career advanced steadily with promotions and increasing responsibilities. The coding program I volunteered with expanded to 3 community centers across the city. I maintained close friendships with Jessica, Tyler, Marcus, and others who had supported me through the darkest times. Looking back on the journey that began that night, when my father shouted those hurtful words, "You've ruined our lives. You're a burden," I realized that painful moment had actually set me free. It had forced me to confront the unhealthy dynamics I had accepted for too long, and to build a life based on authentic connections rather than obligation and guilt. The most valuable lesson I learned is that true love, whether in families, friendships, or romantic relationships, never demands that you diminish yourself. Real love helps both people grow and thrive. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to set clear boundaries and hold people accountable for their actions. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between maintaining peace and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest growth. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. And remember, your worth is never determined by how much you sacrifice for others. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to create healthy boundaries in your own life.